Hi, team. This is George. I wanted to give the second quick session for this week. The first one that you probably already watched was the welcome video. Now we're going to start diving in a little bit to the content in the course. And the first one is, of course, our human performance technology. But the purpose for our course is we're going to survey human performance technology and see where it is, what it means, and all the different proposed actions and uses of it. It's going to be more of a practical, sort of hands-on type of class where you're going to look at situations, scenarios. You're going to bring in some that you've probably seen, and we're just going to learn about human performance from that perspective. We're going to focus on the practice of making material relevant through connections with your own background and future career plans. So, for that, why should we even study HPT? Why should we care? Well, first off, the H is a human part, so it's talent that makes up your organization. So people make up your organizations. So when we talk about organizational culture or an organization, what we're actually talking about is people. So we kind of have to keep that in mind all the time. Just like if you do create training solutions for some of the things that we're looking at, remember that you are actually training people. You're not necessarily training the content, you're training people. So it's important that we keep our eye on that. And then the next step, of course, is performance. That's the activities and measurable outcomes. And that's kind of important because for performance, we want to make sure that they're measurable. Just like writing a good objective or anything else, if the performance is not measurable, then we don't know whether we made it or not. So we want measurable outcomes. And the next step is the technology. That's a systematic and systemic approach to solve practical problems. So I worked in aerospace. Lockheed Martin, worked for Skunk Works for a while, and we would constantly get people. Whoa, what did I just do? We would constantly get managers, different people, even our customers say it's a training issue. It's a training issue. But what we have to remember is training is not the first thing we jump to. We have to look at everything from a more holistic or human-centered approach. So we want to look at technology, performance, and the human aspect and see how it all kind of blends together. So remember, we're going to take a systematic approach at what we're going to look at. We're going to look primarily, and not, well, not primarily, but we're going to look at how cost effectively influences human behavior. So just because we have a solution doesn't mean that it's the right one. So we're going to look up, we're going to study many different ways on how to find solutions, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. And we're going to use three basic analyses. We're going to use a performance analysis, we're going to use a cause analysis, and we're going to use an intervention selection. So we're going to look at those, and that's how we're going to go forward, and that's how we're going to do our gap analysis that you're going to see. But first, we're going to talk about where did HPT come from? And the neat part about that is it's a mix, just like many of the solutions we're going to come up with. It's multiple strategies that come together. So we have behavioral science, systems thinking, ISD, ergonomics, and human factors. All those are a part of HPT. So we just wrap those together, and that's what we call human performance technology. So the interesting thing about that is HPT itself is a group of strategies coming together. And many of the solutions that you're going to come up with are a group of strategies that come together, because quite often we don't find just one strategy that works. So let's take a look at our gap analysis. What a gap analysis is we have our actual state. So this is where we are. And then we move forward, and this is our desired state. And quite often there's that gap in there. So our gap analysis, we have to figure out how to fill that gap. And you'll have people that come straight towards you and just say, hey, we have a training issue, we have this issue. Well, when in reality you have a performance issue and you need to analyze to see why that performance issue exists. And there's probably multiple ways to fix a performance issue. So when there are those multiple ways, you want to look back, you want to look at the cost effectiveness, because cost does matter. Because you can have the greatest solution in the world, but if it would cost more than can be afforded, guess what? Then the company just simply doesn't work any longer. Okay, so HPT, principles of HPT, we're focused on results. And remember, those results aren't necessarily just or I'm sorry, those results are measurable. They have to be measurable, and we're looking at the cost effectiveness as well. We're going to take a systems view. And remember, a systems view is we look at everything like, let's think of a bunch of gears moving. When one gear is broken or one gear tries to move the wrong direction, it affects the whole system. So we need to look, so when we fix one area, we need to look at what's happening in all the other areas. And sometimes you may even fix something in one area and do an outstanding job, but have unintended consequences in another area. So it's important to have that systems view, that systems thinking. We're going to add value by focusing on results desired by and valued by the organization. So if an organization wants to have a certain outcome, they just told us what they need without saying this is a training problem, this is a whatever problem. If we can get them to tell us the desired solution for that organization, what would work, then we are well ahead of the game. We're going to, throughout our week, we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. And we establish partnerships with clients. Now, one thing I did when I was working for Lockheed and was I created partnerships with all the different manufacturing areas. And what that did was that kind of transformed our learning and development or training department. We always call ourselves a training department. Because the minute that we became partners, we went into a relationship with that organization. So we went into a people relationship, we went into an organizational relationship. And what that caused was that caused us to be able to be a partner. And when I say partner, what that means is we're able to look at the issue from a performance standpoint, from a performance perspective, and then we're able to come up with solutions that are more effective because we take into consideration cost and everything else that's happening within that organization and within that process. So instead of being told what we need to do for the organization, when we became a partner, we actually were more welcome there to do our analysis. And when we were able to do our analysis, we came up with better solutions, and that was the key. So it's really important to build those partnerships with your clients, different organizations, things like that. So that's just our first step. So I hope you enjoyed the kind of introduction to HPT, and I look forward to working with everyone this week.